Hello there, fellow night owls and seekers of the unknown. How's your day been? What time is it where you are right now? I'm always curious about where my listeners come from around the world, whether you're tuning in from the misty mountains of Scotland or the sun-drenched beaches of Australia. Before we dive into tonight's disturbing tale, if you enjoy these stories that dance on the edge of reality, make sure to subscribe to Sleep Theories. Hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, dim your lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself. What you're about to hear isn't just fiction. Some say it's based on classified information that was never meant to reach public ears. Tonight we explore the darkest corners of government experimentation and the thin membrane between dimensions. Daniel Cross bolted upright in his bed, sweat-drenched sheets twisted around his legs like restraints. The dream had returned, more vivid this time. Underground tunnels bathed in pulsing blue light, the cold metal chair, the leather straps on his wrists, and the voices, always the voices, echoing through concrete chambers. Subject 17 demonstrates exceptional receptivity, increased neural amplitude by 30%. His bedroom television flickered with static, though he was certain he'd turned it off before going to sleep. From within the dancing grey pixels came a familiar hum, a sequence of tones just below normal hearing threshold. Something about it pulled at the corners of his mind, like fingers trying to pry open a locked door. Daniel stumbled out of bed and approached the screen, mesmerised. Within the chaos of white noise, patterns emerged, geometric formations that shouldn't exist in random static. His reflection in the screen looked foreign, almost like another person watching him from behind the glass. Delta Protocol 17, he whispered, the words rising unbidden from some hidden chamber of memory. Initiate phase bend. The static intensified, the hum growing to an electric whine that made his fillings ache. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the television went black. Daniel stood there, trembling in the dark, wondering why tears were streaming down his face. In the morning, he convinced himself it had been nothing but a particularly vivid nightmare. But as he brushed his teeth, he noticed something unsettling in the bathroom mirror. A small red mark behind his ear, perfectly circular, like a healed puncture wound. He had no memory of receiving it. As the days passed, the dreams intensified. Always the same elements. The underground facility, scientists in lab coats, the chair with its cruel restraints, and tests. Endless tests designed to push the boundaries of his mind. In each dream he was younger, perhaps 11 or 12 years old. But the strangest part was the location that kept appearing in the background of these fractured memories. A distinctive radar tower rising against a darkening sky. When not at work coding security algorithms for a defense contractor, Daniel found himself obsessively drawing the tower, trying to place where he might have seen it before. His apartment walls became covered with sketches, the tower from different angles, the curved coastline it overlooked, strange symbols that his hand seemed to produce without conscious direction. His colleague Martin noticed the change in him first. "You look like hell, Dan," he said over lunch one day. "Not sleeping?" Daniel hesitated. "Just some weird dreams." "About what?" "I don't know. Some kind of facility. Tests. A radar tower by the ocean." Martin's plastic fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What kind of tower?" "An FPS-35, Cold War era. Massive thing with a distinctive cowling." Daniel blinked, surprised at his own precise knowledge. Martin set down his fork. "That's oddly specific for a dream." "I know, and there's something else." Daniel lowered his voice. "Sometimes when there's static on the TV I hear something, like a signal." "What does it say?" "It doesn't speak. It's more like a beacon, calling me somewhere." Martin studied him for a long moment. "You ever heard of Camp Hero? Out in Montauk?" The name sent an electric shiver down Daniel's spine. His coffee cup slipped from suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the floor. Jesus, you okay? Martin asked, jumping back from the spreading puddle. I need to go there, Daniel whispered, staring at nothing. Montauk. The drive to Long Island took 4 hours, but to Daniel it felt like returning from an exile that had lasted decades. As he crossed into the township of Montauk, a pressure began building behind his eyes. Not quite pain, but an insistent awareness, like the sensation before a sneeze that never comes. The roads grew narrower, pine forests pressing in on both sides. His GPS lost signal twice, but Daniel found he didn't need it. His hands seemed to know which turns to take, guiding the car along increasingly remote routes until the trees gave way to scrubland, and beyond that, the Atlantic stretched to the horizon. And there it stood, exactly as he'd drawn it 100 times, the massive radar tower of Camp Hero, its distinctive silhouette rising against the pale blue sky. The abandoned Air Force Base sprawled beneath it, a collection of bunker-like buildings and concrete structures designed to withstand Soviet bombs that never fell. According to the weathered sign at the entrance, Camp Hero was now a state park, its military function long obsolete. But something about the perimeter fence looked too new, the security cameras too well maintained for a simple historic site. Daniel parked in the nearly empty lot and approached the visitor centre, a converted military building with peeling green paint. Inside, a bored park ranger glanced up from her crossword puzzle. "Closing in an hour," she said without preamble. "I was wondering what you could tell me about the history of this place," Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice casual despite the hammering of his heart. "Standard Cold War radar station, decommissioned in the early 70s. She pushed a pamphlet across the counter. "Self-guided tour maps there. Stick to the marked trails." "What about the underground sections?" The ranger's crossword pencil stopped mid-letter. Her eyes flicked up to study him more carefully. "There aren't any underground sections open to the public, but they exist. Look, mister, this is just an old radar station. If you're one of those conspiracy nuts." "I've been here before," Daniel interrupted, surprising himself. "When I was a child, not possible. This place was sealed military property until 92. Daniel leaned forward. "What about the Montauk project?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The ranger's face hardened as she set down her pencil and reached for the phone. "Park's closing early today. You need to leave." "I just have a few questions." "Now," she said, her finger hovering over the keypad. "Or I call security." Daniel retreated to his car, the pamphlet clutched in his hand. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he noticed a black SUV with government plates turning in. The man in the passenger seat photographed his license plate as they passed. Instead of leaving, Daniel drove to the public beach adjacent to the former base. From there, he followed a trail that hugged the dramatic bluffs overlooking the Atlantic. The radar tower remained visible above the tree line, seeming to watch him as he walked. When he reached a chain-link fence marking the base's boundary, Daniel felt a strange duality, his conscious mind seeing it for the first time, while something deeper recognized every rust spot and bent link. He knew, without understanding how, that 20 yards to the left, the fence had been repaired where someone had once cut through it. Sure enough, when he checked, there was a section of newer fencing exactly where he'd expected. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Daniel found a secluded spot where the bluff had partially collapsed, creating a natural path down to a narrow strip of beach. The base's concrete seawall extended here, covered in graffiti and eroded by decades of salt spray. He ran his hand along the rough surface until his fingers caught on something, a small recess containing what appeared to be a rusted electrical box. Without hesitation, Daniel entered a sequence of numbers, 8-1-3-5. Nothing happened. He tried again with 8315, and then finally 8153. A deep mechanical groan emanated from within the wall. A section of concrete, expertly disguised as part of the seawall, shifted inward by several inches. Daniel pushed, and it swung open on hidden hinges to reveal a dark passage leading into the earth. The smell that wafted out was a complex mixture of mildew, ozone, and something chemical that triggered an intense wave of déjà vu. Daniel switched on his phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The passage sloped downward, concrete walls giving way to rough-hewn stone that glistened with moisture. Daniel moved cautiously, guided more by buried memory than by sight. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger space, what appeared to be an abandoned maintenance room filled with rusted equipment and collapsed shelving. But Daniel knew this wasn't its original purpose. He directed his light toward the far wall, where a heavy metal door hung partially ajar. Beyond it lay darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow his flashlight beam. As he approached the threshold, a wave of dizziness overcame him. Fractured images flashed through his mind. Children in hospital gowns, scientists with clipboards, a massive chair surrounded by electronic equipment, and always, the tests. Focus on the light, Daniel. Tell us what you see through the gateway. His phone slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor as Daniel collapsed. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was a symbol scratched into the metal door, a triangle intersecting with a perfect circle. When he awoke, Daniel was lying on the beach, waves lapping at his feet. The sun had set, and stars glittered in the darkening sky. His clothes were soaked with seawater, though he had no memory of entering the ocean. His phone was gone. And most disturbing of all, the entrance in the seawall had vanished, not just closed, but seemingly never there at all. Daniel stumbled to his feet, disoriented. His watch showed it was just past 9 p.m, but the date displayed was wrong. According to his watch, he had lost nearly 3 days. The drive back to his apartment in Connecticut was a blur, a dreamlike passage through darkness punctuated by the hypnotic sweep of headlights. Daniel's mind churned with fragments of memory that couldn't possibly be his, yet felt more authentic than his recollections of college or his first job. He remembered the chair, the Montauk chair they'd called it, a monstrous assemblage of technology salvaged from alien craft and enhanced with Tesla-inspired circuitry. He remembered the sensation when they activated it with him strapped inside, like his consciousness was being pulled through the top of his skull and stretched across dimensions. And he remembered what they made him do with it. Back in his apartment, Daniel paced until dawn, scribbling everything he could recall into a notebook. Names surfaced: Doctor, Marcus Bennett, the project lead with cold blue eyes, Cameron Hayes, the military liaison who always smelled of cigarettes and cheap cologne, and Preston Nichols, the reluctant technician who sometimes snuck the children candy bars when the others weren't looking. Preston Nichols. The name felt important. When morning came, Daniel called in sick to work and drove to the nearest public library. The librarian gave him an odd look when he asked if they had anything on the Montauk project, but directed him to their small collection of conspiracy literature. There, sandwiched between books on Roswell and MK Ultra, was a worn paperback. The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, by Preston B. Nichols and Peter Moon. Daniel's hands trembled as he flipped through pages describing exactly what he'd been remembering. The secret installation at Camp Hero, the psychic experiments, the Montauk chair, even the alleged success in manipulating the fabric of time and space. According to Nichols, the Montauk Project was the continuation of the Philadelphia experiment, another rumoured government program that supposedly made a naval destroyer, the USS Eldridge, temporarily invisible and teleported it from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia in 1943. The book claimed the Montauk Project had been shuttered after an incident in 1983 when a monstrous manifestation, dubbed the Beast, had been psychically pulled through a dimensional gateway. The creature had wreaked havoc before the power was cut and the project abandoned. But Daniel knew this wasn't entirely true. The project hadn't ended. It had evolved. The techniques refined at Montauk had been incorporated into other programs, dispersed across multiple sites to ensure no single failure could expose the entire operation. Back at his apartment, Daniel found himself standing before his closet, staring at a locked metal box on the top shelf. He had no memory of putting it there, yet he knew exactly what it contained. The key was taped underneath his dresser, precisely where some part of him expected it to be. Inside the box was a US Bank safety deposit key. The following morning, Daniel presented himself at First National Bank in downtown Hartford. He provided the key along with his ID, and the manager escorted him to the vault. When they were alone with the metal drawer extracted from the wall, Daniel opened it with a sense of inevitability. Inside lay a manila envelope, sealed with red security tape bearing federal classifications he shouldn't have had access to. He broke the seal and emptied the contents onto the small table. Photographs spilled out, black and white images of children in a sterile facility. In several, Daniel recognised his younger self, perhaps 10 years old, wired to various machines. In one particularly disturbing image, he sat in a massive chair surrounded by Tesla coils and computer banks, his small form almost swallowed by the ominous apparatus. There were documents too, partial research notes, diagrams of the Montauk chair annotated with equations that made his eyes hurt to look at, and a map of Camp Hero with underground sections marked in red. At the bottom of the pile lay a compact disc in a paper sleeve, unmarked except for a date. August 12th, 1983, the day of the alleged beast incident. Most chilling of all was a typed list of names under the heading Project Subjects Delta Group. His own name appeared with a designation that turned his blood cold. Subject 17, Primary Gate Opener. That night, with shaking hands, Daniel loaded the disc into his laptop. After whirring for several seconds, the screen displayed a single video file. The footage was grainy, security camera quality. It showed a concrete room dominated by the chair he'd been drawing obsessively. A boy, himself, was strapped into it, electrodes attached to his temples. Men in lab coats monitored equipment while military personnel stood guard at the doors. A voice off camera counted down. Initiating Delta Protocol in 3, 2, 1. The lights in the facility dimmed as power surged to the chair. Young Daniel's body went rigid, his back arching impossibly as his eyes rolled back. Equipment sparked and smoked. Several technicians backed away nervously. Then, at the centre of the room, the air itself seemed to tear open. A writhing black void that pulsed like a living thing. From within that impossible darkness, something began to emerge. The camera feed distorted violently, static washing across the screen. When the image stabilised, chaos had erupted. People were screaming, running. Blood spattered one of the walls. And at the edge of the frame, partially obscured, was a glimpse of something that couldn't exist in our reality. A mass of shifting geometries and impossible angles that hurt to look at. The final clear image before the video cut to static. Young Daniel staring directly into the camera. Blood streaming from his nose and ears. Mouth moving to form words that seemed addressed to his future self. You have to shut it down before it opens again. Daniel ejected the disc with numb fingers, his mind reeling. Not just from what he'd seen, but from what was happening inside his head. Memories crystallizing, filling in gaps he hadn't known existed. He remembered now. All of it. The next day he called the only person who might understand. The number was etched in his memory, though he couldn't recall ever learning it. Hello? The voice that answered was aged, cautious. Is this Preston Nichols? A long pause. Who's asking? My name is Daniel Cross. I was Subject 17 at Montauk. The silence that followed lasted so long that Daniel thought the connection had been lost. Finally the old man spoke, his voice a haunted whisper. God help you, boy. They're still watching. I need answers. Not over the phone. They're always listening. Another pause. The lighthouse. Tomorrow. Noon. The line went dead. Daniel arrived at the Montauk Point Lighthouse an hour early, parking his rental car. He'd abandoned his own vehicle, suddenly paranoid about tracking devices, in the tourist lot. The historic lighthouse stood tall against a sky heavy with approaching storm clouds, its red and white stripes a cheerful contrast to the grim purpose of his visit. He spotted Nichols immediately, a heavy-set older man in a worn fisherman's jacket sitting alone on a bench overlooking the Atlantic. As Daniel approached, Nichols didn't turn but spoke as if continuing a conversation already in progress. "They told us we were serving our country," he said, eyes fixed on the churning waves below. "Advancing human potential, opening frontiers. What a load of horse shit." Daniel sat beside him. "You were there. You helped them. And I've spent 40 years trying to make up for it." Nichols finally turned to look at him, his weathered face a map of regret. "Jesus, you grew up. Last time I saw you, you were just a skinny kid with too much power in your head. What did they do to me?" Nichols sighed, reaching into his pocket for a pack of cigarettes. His hands trembled slightly as he lit one. "You were special, even among the sensitives. Most of the children could receive impressions, maybe move small objects, but you could create doorways. Doorways to where? That was the question, wasn't it?" At first, they were just focused on remote viewing, psychically observing distant locations. Then they realized some of you kids could not just see, but reach. And you, Daniel, you could open gates that others could step through. The old man took a long drag from his cigarette. They started small, different rooms in the facility, then different points in time. Just minutes at first, then hours, then years. By 82, they had you opening doorways to other places entirely. "The beast," Daniel said quietly. Nichols' face went ashen. "You remember?" "I found a recording." "Then you know what happened. What came through wasn't from another place on Earth. Not even from another time. It was from somewhere else. Somewhere that operates under different physical laws." Nichols stubbed out his cigarette with more force than necessary. "We lost 16 people that day before they cut the power. And the thing, it didn't die. It just folded back into dimensions we can't perceive." Daniel's head throbbed with half-formed memories. "They shut it down after that." "Officially, yes. The Montauk project was terminated, the facility sealed. But you know better, don't you?" Nichols fixed him with a penetrating stare. "They just went deeper underground, compartmentalized. The work continued." "But I don't remember anything after that day. I have a whole life. School, college, my job. Artificial memories, very sophisticated. The best MK Ultra techniques combined with targeted chemical therapy. They built you a new identity, brick by brick." Nichols glanced around nervously. "The question is, why are you remembering now?" "The programming doesn't just break down on its own." Before Daniel could respond, his vision split, like a double exposure photograph. Overlaid on the present scene was another image. The same lighthouse, but under clear blue skies, with Nichols wearing different clothes. "Happening again," Nichols was saying, his voice echoing strangely as the two realities flickered and merged. "The temporal distortions are getting worse." Daniel gripped the bench, nauseated by the visual discord. "What's happening to me? Time is bleeding through. Your connection to the Montauk chair never fully severed. It just went dormant." Nichols leaned closer, his face shifting subtly between older and younger versions of himself. "Listen carefully. There's an access point they never sealed. Bunker 14 near the old power station. The equipment is still there. You need to..." The world around them rippled like disturbed water. A crushing pressure built inside Daniel's skull as reality itself seemed to stutter. When it stabilized, Nichols was gone. In his place sat a teenage boy with a familiar face. Nichols, 50 years younger, wearing a Camp Hero security badge. "Find the failsafe before it's too late," the boy continued in Nichols' elderly voice, seemingly unaware of his transformed state. They're trying to recreate the conditions from 83, but they don't understand the danger. The membrane between worlds is thinner now, weakened by the original experiments. The young Nichols flickered and was replaced by the old man again. He clutched Daniel's arm with surprising strength. Go back to Camp Hero, find Bunker 14, destroy the chair before they can use it again. Another wave of temporal distortion washed over them. When it passed, Daniel was alone on the bench. A family of tourists walked by, giving him curious looks as he sat there, pale and shaking. That night, Daniel returned to Camp Hero under cover of darkness. The perimeter fence posed little challenge. He remembered where the security systems had blind spots, knowledge surfacing from decades past. The ranger station was dark and empty. He made his way through the abandoned base, guided by memories that grew stronger with each step. The power station stood silent, its massive turbines long still. Behind it, half hidden by encroaching vegetation, was a small concrete structure with a faded 14 stenciled on its rusted door. The lock had been broken recently. Inside, a metal staircase descended into darkness. Daniel followed it down, the beam of his flashlight illuminating walls that transitioned from concrete to natural bedrock. The air grew colder, charged with an electrical scent that made the hairs on his arms stand up. At the bottom, a long corridor stretched before him. As he walked, temporal distortions intensified. In flashes he saw the corridor as it had been, brightly lit, staffed by busy technicians and armed guards. He heard snippets of conversation from 40 years ago, saw ghostly figures pass through him as past and present overlapped. The corridor ended at a massive vault door standing partially open. Beyond it lay the heart of the Montauk project, a cavernous chamber housing equipment that should have been removed decades ago. And at its centre stood the chair. Even inactive, it radiated a sense of wrongness, a technology that should not exist, built from principles science had yet to discover. Surrounding it were banks of computers and equipment in various states of repair. Some appeared anciently obsolete, others looked surprisingly modern. Most disturbing of all were the signs of recent activity. Fresh cables ran to newly installed equipment, toolboxes lay open on workbenches, and a whiteboard was covered with complex equations and a countdown schedule. According to the board, whatever they were planning would happen tomorrow night. As Daniel approached the chair, his consciousness began to splinter. He was simultaneously his present self and his child self, experiencing both timelines at once. In one reality, he stood before the dormant machine as an adult. In the other, he was strapped into it as technicians calibrated its settings. "Good morning, Daniel," said a voice from both past and present. "We've been waiting for you to return." Daniel turned to find Dr. Bennett stepping from the shadows, older now, his hair silver instead of brown, but with the same cold blue eyes. "You," Daniel whispered, "you're still running this. Did you think we'd abandon the most important scientific breakthrough in human history?" Bennett circled him slowly. "Especially after what you showed us was possible. You need to shut this down. You don't understand what you're doing. On the contrary, we understand far better now." Bennett gestured to the upgraded equipment. "We've spent 40 years refining the technology, studying the data from the original experiments. The incident in 83 was a momentary setback. 16 people died. Progress requires sacrifice." Bennett's voice hardened. "And now you've returned, exactly as our models predicted. The prodigal son drawn back at precisely the right moment." Daniel backed away, moving toward the chair. "I came to destroy it." "You came because you're still connected to it, because on a quantum level, you've never left that chair." Bennett nodded to someone behind Daniel. "Your memories, your independent life, they were never real. Just a holding pattern while your mind matured into what we needed." Too late, Daniel sensed movement behind him. A sharp pain blossomed in his neck as a hypodermic needle sank into his flesh. The room tilted sideways as the sedative took hold. "Welcome home, Subject 17, Bennett said as darkness closed in. "Tomorrow, you'll help us open the ultimate doorway." Daniel awoke strapped to the chair, electrodes attached to his temples and chest. The bunker hummed with power, banks of equipment manned by technicians in white lab coats. Armed guards stood at attention along the walls. His mind felt clearer than it had in days. The chemical fog of suppressed memories finally lifted. He remembered everything now. His childhood, the tests, the growing fear among the scientists as they realised what they'd discovered, and most of all the true nature of what had come through the gate in 1983. Dr. Bennett approached, clipboard in hand. "Consciousness has returned. Excellent. We have limited time before the window aligns." "You can't do this," Daniel said, straining against his restraints. "You saw what happened last time. A miscalculation. The entity was unstable in our dimensional framework." Bennett checked readings on a nearby monitor. "This time we're better prepared. The integration will be controlled." "Integration?" Cold horror spread through Daniel's chest. "You're not just opening a doorway. You want to bring something through permanently?" Bennett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Not something, Daniel. Someone. Or perhaps, more accurately, someone's." He gestured toward a large display screen where images flashed in a rapid sequence. Advanced technology, biological enhancements, weapons beyond current human capability. Our visitors have so much to offer. Knowledge, power, evolutionary advancement. Bennett adjusted a dial, increasing power to the chair. "All they ask in return is a suitable environment, hosts who can withstand the integration process." "They're not visitors," Daniel said, the truth crystallizing in his mind. "They're invaders, and you're giving them the door code." Bennett ignored him, addressing the technicians. "Begin the initialization sequence. Power to 70%. The chair hummed to life, vibrating subtly beneath Daniel. Familiar sensations flooded his consciousness. The stretching feeling, as if his mind were being pulled from his body and extended across unseen dimensions. On monitors around the room, waveforms pulsed and danced. A technician called out readings. Quantum tunneling effect established. Temporal aperture forming. Daniel closed his eyes, focusing inward. They thought they were in control, using him as a tool, but they'd forgotten something crucial, something even he had only just remembered. He wasn't just a key to open the door, he was the doorway itself. In 1983, when the beast had emerged, young Daniel had done something desperate in the final moments. He'd imprinted a failsafe into the quantum structure of the chair, a back door that only he could access. As the power built around him, Daniel reached into that hidden channel, his consciousness expanding beyond the confines of normal space-time. He could feel them waiting on the other side, vast intelligences, ancient and patient, pressing against the membrane between worlds like fingers testing a soap bubble's strength. And they were hungry. "Aperture at 60%, called a technician. "Dimensional breach imminent." Bennett leaned over Daniel, voice low and eager. "Can you feel them? They've waited so long to meet us properly." "Yes," Daniel whispered, his eyes still closed. "I can feel them, but they're not what you think." "Power surge," shouted a technician. "Systems drawing more than input capacity," Bennett whirled. "That's impossible. Check the—" "It's me," Daniel said, his voice oddly calm as blood began to trickle from his nose. "I'm the power source now. I always was." Around the room, equipment sparked and smoked. Lights flickered as power drained from all systems toward the chair. The metal beneath Daniel grew hot enough to scorch his skin, but he barely noticed the pain. At the centre of the room, air began to twist and distort, reality folding like origami into impossible geometries. Through the forming aperture came glimpses of a realm beyond human comprehension, vast architectures that defied Euclidean space, entities composed of light and thought rather than matter. "Yes!" Bennett exulted, oblivious to the danger. "It's working!" A technician grabbed his arm. "Sir, The subject's brainwave patterns are altering the protocol. He's changing the coordinates. Override him. Cut direct neural input. We can't. He's bypassed the safeguards. Daniel opened his eyes, now glowing with an inner light that cast no shadows. When he spoke, his voice reverberated with harmonics that made glass surfaces throughout the bunker vibrate. "I'm not opening a door for them to come here," he said. "I'm creating a vacuum, a one-way passage." The aperture grew, swirling darkness shot through with impossible colours. Air rushed toward it in a howling vortex. Loose objects began sliding across the floor. "What are you doing?" Bennett screamed over the maelstrom. "What I should have done 40 years ago!" Daniel's restraint snapped as his body lifted slightly from the chair, suspended by forces beyond conventional physics. "I'm collapsing the bridge between worlds, permanently." The suction intensified. A guard lost his footing and slid screaming into the vortex, his body stretching bizarrely before vanishing. Others clutched desperately at bolted-down equipment. "You'll destroy everything!" Bennett clawed his way toward a control panel. "Only the infection," Daniel replied. "The chair, the technology, the knowledge, everything that came through, everything that doesn't belong in our reality." With a sound like the universe tearing, the aperture expanded to engulf the chair itself. Metal warped and stretched as it was pulled into the void. Equipment imploded, circuitry unravelling at the atomic level as fundamental forces rewrote themselves around the collapsing gateway. Bennett made a final desperate lunge toward Daniel, face contorted with rage. "We were so close!" As the doctor's fingers brushed his arm, Daniel felt a moment of genuine pity. They were never going to share, Doctor. We weren't potential allies. We were cattle. The floor beneath them buckled as structural supports failed. Chunks of ceiling crashed down as the entire bunker began to collapse inward toward the hungry void. In the final moments before consciousness fled, Daniel saw something massive beginning to emerge from the aperture, not entering our world but being pulled back to its own. The beast of Montauk, returning to its native dimension after 40 years of patient waiting in the spaces between worlds. Its vast form registered in his human perception only as impressions, countless eyes, geometries that hurt to comprehend, and a telepathic voice that bypassed his ears to resonate directly in his mind. "You have closed the way. But there are other doors, other keys." As darkness claimed him, Daniel directed one final surge of power into the collapsing gateway, sealing it with his consciousness as the lock. Daniel awoke to the rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors. Sunlight streamed through Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across starched white sheets. His body felt leaden, every movement requiring conscious effort. A nurse noticed he was awake and summoned a doctor. A kindly-faced woman who explained he had been found unconscious on the beach near Montauk Point, severely dehydrated and suffering from exposure. He had been in a coma for 6 days. When she asked what had happened to him, Daniel claimed not to remember. 3 days later, he checked himself out against medical advice. His apartment, when he returned to it, had been searched with professional thoroughness, nothing obviously disturbed, but he could feel the intrusion like a psychic fingerprint on every surface. His computer was gone. So were his notebooks, filled with memories and sketches. In their place sat a slim manila folder containing a single document, a government position offer with the Department of Energy at a salary triple his current one. The message was clear: forget what happened, take the money, live a comfortable life under watchful eyes. Daniel burned the offer and set to work. Over the next week he purchased equipment from various sources: a high-end laptop paid for in cash, specialised broadcasting gear from hobbyist shops, components that could be assembled into a transmission system powerful enough to reach audiences beyond normal channels. In a cheap motel room paid for under a false name, he connected the final wires and activated the system. The setup was crude but effective, capable of piggybacking on existing broadcast networks and digital platforms. inserting his message into the stream of constant information that flowed through modern society. Daniel positioned himself before the camera and began recording. My name is Daniel Cross. Until recently, I was Subject 17 of a classified government program known as the Montauk Project. What I'm about to tell you sounds like fiction. I wish it were. But Montauk wasn't some urban legend. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It is real. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, at the decommissioned Camp Hero Air Force Base in Montauk, New York, the government conducted experiments in mind control, teleportation, and dimensional manipulation. They used children with psychic abilities. I was one of those children. They discovered that the human mind, properly augmented and focused through what they called the Montauk chair, could do more than just bend spoons or read thoughts. It could tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. Through these experiments, contact was made with entities from beyond our dimension. The scientists thought they were communicating with advanced beings who would share knowledge and technology. They didn't understand what they were really dealing with. These entities, I don't know what to call them except perhaps predators, they wanted access to our world, not to share, not to help, but to colonize, to consume. They found willing collaborators among power-hungry men who didn't understand what they were inviting in. In 1983 there was an incident. Something came through, partially. We called it the Beast. 16 people died, officially. The project was supposedly shut down, but it never truly ended. They just went deeper underground, fragmented the research across multiple black sites. Last week they tried again. They brought me back, their most successful gate opener, to create a permanent doorway between dimensions. But I collapsed the gateway instead, destroying the Montauk chair and sealing the breach. Daniel paused, wiping blood that had begun to trickle from his nose. I don't know how long I have before they find me. The entities can't come through directly anymore, but their influence remains. They've compromised people in positions of power, not through some sci-fi body snatching, but through whispered promises, glimpses of knowledge no human was meant to possess. The technology created at Montauk still exists in fragmented form. The research continues under different code names, different facilities. Watch for signs, unusual military installations, clusters of missing children with unusual abilities, weather anomalies that defy explanation. These are the fingerprints of operations continuing what Montauk began. I'm uploading documentation with this broadcast, images, partial research notes, coordinates of suspected continuation sites. I've hidden additional evidence in secure locations that will be released automatically if anything happens to me. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, fundamentally wrong in a way you can't explain, pay attention to that feeling. The membrane between worlds has been weakened. Sometimes things slip through, even without a gate as large as the one they tried to create. They made us forget, but memory is a dangerous thing. Daniel leaned closer to the camera, his eyes haunted but determined, especially when it remembers the future. The recording ended there. Daniel uploaded it along with scanned copies of the documents he'd recovered. He used specialized distribution protocols to seed the files across countless servers worldwide. Too dispersed to be completely erased. Too widespread to be dismissed as the ravings of a single disturbed individual. As the final upload completed, his laptop screen flickered with static. From within the electronic noise, patterns emerged. The same signal that had called to him from his television weeks ago. But this time Daniel recognized it for what it was. A beacon. Not from them, but from others like him. Children of Montauk, awakening to their suppressed memories, reaching out across the digital void. He wasn't alone. Daniel closed the laptop and packed his few remaining possessions. Through the thin motel curtains, he could see 2 black SUVs pulling into the parking lot. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with the coordinated precision of government operatives. They were too late. The truth was out now, propagating through networks they couldn't fully control. His testimony would reach millions before they could contain it. seeds of awareness planted in receptive minds. Daniel sat calmly on the edge of the bed, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door. He wasn't afraid anymore. He understood now that what had happened at Montauk had changed him permanently. The powers they had awakened in him hadn't disappeared. They had merely gone dormant, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. As the heavy footsteps approached his door, Daniel closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, searching for the quantum threads that connected all points in space-time. There were other places he could go, other times. After all, he had been their best gate opener. The door burst open. 2 agents rushed in, weapons drawn. They found an empty room, the window still closed and locked from the inside, the bathroom vacant. On the bed lay Daniel's phone, screen displaying a text message addressed to Dr. Bennett. There are other doors, other keys, and now I have them all. 3 days later, on computer screens across the world, a single symbol appeared momentarily before vanishing, a triangle intersecting with a perfect circle. The Montauk project was never officially acknowledged. Those who spoke too publicly about it suffered accidents or disappeared. The broadcast was discredited, its evidence dismissed as elaborate hoaxes. But something had changed. People began to notice things they'd overlooked before. Children reported strange dreams of underground facilities and tests. Researchers documented unexplained temporal anomalies near certain government installations, and occasionally, in the white noise between radio stations or in the static of untuned televisions, listeners reported hearing a voice, just on the edge of comprehension, repeating the same warning. They made us forget, but memory is a dangerous thing, especially when it remembers the future. Behind him, Maya Torres rolled her eyes but kept quiet. As his production partner and the technical wizard behind the scenes, she'd heard this speech before. MK Ultra experiments, the Montauk Project time travel claims, moon landing anomalies. Jason had covered it all with obsessive detail. But this time was different. This wasn't just talk. "Cut the recording," Jason said, spinning his chair to face Maya. "Did you get the email?" Maya nodded, tucking a strand of black hair behind her ear. "Desert Valley Logistics. You got the job. Background check cleared somehow." "Not somehow," Jason grinned, looking more like an excited kid than a 31-year-old man. 6 months of careful planning, fake references, clean digital footprint, the works. Maya's expression remained skeptical. Food service delivery to a military installation isn't exactly breaking into Area 51, Jason. It's getting me through the front door, he countered, and that's more than anyone else has managed. The plan had been brewing for over a year. Jason had been tracking Desert Valley Logistics, a civilian contractor that supplied meal services to various military installations across Nevada, including the Nevada Test and Training Range, home to the facility known as Area 51. Maya pulled up the encrypted files on her tablet. "Let's go through it again. I start the job on Monday, standard deliveries for the first month, building trust. Then I start mapping routes, security patterns, checkpoint procedures, while wearing specially designed glasses with microscopic cameras," Maya added, which, by the way, cost us nearly all our equipment budget. "Worth it," Jason insisted. "Undetectable to standard security sweeps. The images get transmitted to your setup in the van through the modified watch." The plan was intricate. Jason would work the job legitimately, slowly gathering intelligence. Maya would build a mobile command center in a van, equipped with signal boosters, satellite uplinks, and a complex VPN system to mask their broadcast location. After months of preparation and dry runs, Jason would make his move during a scheduled delivery, breaking away from the designated path to explore and document the facility's most restricted areas. "You know this isn't just trespassing, right?" Maya said. "This is federal property, highly classified. We're talking serious prison time." Jason's face grew serious. Do you know why I do this, Maya? For the views? The subscribers? No. He turned to a corkboard on the wall covered in newspaper clippings, printed forum posts and red string connecting various points. My dad worked at Groom Lake for 12 years. Came home one day with headaches that never stopped. 2 months later, brain cancer. Stage 4. No history in our family. Maya's expression softened. Jason. He tried to tell my mum something before he died. Something about non-terrestrial intelligence, about things in the sky that weren't from here. They had him on so many medications she thought he was delirious. Jason's voice cracked slightly. But I believe him, and I need proof. Maya sighed, knowing there was no talking him out of it. The stream goes to a secure server first, she said, returning to the plan. If anything happens to you, it automatically uploads to 17 different platforms simultaneously. Dead man's switch, Jason nodded. Perfect. Not the term I'd use, Maya muttered. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Jason settled into his delivery job, memorising protocols and building a reputation as a reliable, if unmemorable, employee. Maya transformed an old van into a mobile broadcast studio with backup generators, multiple internet connections and emergency protocols. They tested the equipment repeatedly in the desert, finding the ideal spots where Maya could park without arousing suspicion while maintaining signal strength. The hidden cameras worked flawlessly, transmitting crystal-clear footage to Maya's receivers. Jason's followers noticed his reduced posting schedule, but he kept them engaged with cryptic updates, researching something big, truth is coming, and some secrets can't stay buried. His subscriber count finally crossed the 1 million mark, though he barely acknowledged it. His mind was elsewhere. 2 days before the planned infiltration, Maya caught Jason staring at an old photograph of his father. "We can still back out," she said quietly. Jason shook his head. "We've come too far. And if there's nothing to find, if it's just a regular military base, then I'll report that." "But it's not," Jason insisted. "Remember the truck driver from last month? The one who claimed he saw something during a late-night delivery?" Maya remembered. A post on a fringe forum describing unusual aircraft movements and what the poster called non-standard personnel, with strange physical characteristics. The post had been removed within hours, and the account deleted. "Could be a hoax," she said. "Or it could be confirmation," Jason countered. "Either way, we're going to find out." The night before the operation, neither of them could sleep. Jason ran through the plan one final time while Maya triple-checked her equipment. "Camera feeds are clear," she confirmed. "Audio is good. Encrypted channel is ready." Jason nodded, unexpectedly quiet. "Having second thoughts?" Maya asked. "No," he said after a moment. "Just thinking about how this might be the most important thing we ever do." Maya reached out and squeezed his hand. "Just stick to the plan. Get in, document what you can, get out. No heroics." "Yes, Ma'am," Jason replied with a small smile. Neither of them mentioned what they were both thinking, that by this time tomorrow they might have changed history or disappeared from it entirely. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under the morning sun as Jason guided the delivery truck along the lonely highway. The air conditioning struggled against the heat, and his palms were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. "Checkpoint 1 is coming up in 2 miles, his voice came through his nearly invisible earpiece. "Remember, just like any other delivery." "Copy that," Jason murmured, adjusting his uniform shirt. The Desert Valley Logistics logo felt like a disguise now, not just work attire. The first checkpoint was routine, a guard station at the edge of the Nevada Test and Training Range. Jason had been through it dozens of times over the past months. He handed over his ID badge, manifest and delivery authorization. "Morning, Reeve," said the guard. a man named Peterson who Jason had become casually friendly with. Early today. Traffic was light, Jason replied with a rehearsed ease. His glasses were recording everything, transmitting to Maya in the van parked 3 miles back. All clear, Peterson said after checking the documents. Stay on the designated route. Jason nodded and pulled forward. The first gate lifted, and he entered the outer perimeter of the restricted area. His heart pounded as the truck rumbled down the road, kicking up dust behind it. First checkpoint clear, he whispered to Maya. How's the feed? Crystal clear, she replied. 35 people already watching the private stream. Remember, I'm not releasing this publicly until you're safely out. The road stretched ahead for miles, empty desert on both sides, watched by distant camera towers. Jason had mapped them all during previous deliveries. He knew their blind spots, their ranges. Second checkpoint in sight, he reported after 15 minutes of driving. This one was different, more serious. Armed military personnel instead of civilian contractors. Jason felt his pulse quicken as he pulled to a stop. 2 guards approached the truck. One took his paperwork while the other walked around the vehicle with a mirror on a pole, checking underneath for anything suspicious. Please step out of the vehicle, sir, the first guard requested. Jason complied, feeling unusually aware of the weight of the hidden camera glasses on his face, the watch on his wrist quietly transmitting everything back to Maya. Routine inspection, guard explained, though his tone suggested there was nothing routine about it. Arms out, please. Jason extended his arms as the guard passed a handheld scanner over him. The device beeped over his watch. Standard issue company tracker, Jason explained before the guard could ask. All delivery personnel wear them. Safety protocol. The guard nodded, seemingly satisfied. Jason had carefully modified the watch to appear as a simple GPS tracker if scanned, concealing its true communications capabilities. Your delivery today is for the mess hall, the guard asked, consulting the manifest. Yes, sir. Weekly supply run. Nothing exciting. Just food. The guard's eyes lingered on Jason's face a moment too long. You've been doing this route for a while now. About 3 months, Jason replied, keeping his voice steady. It's a good gig. No traffic out here. After what felt like an eternity, the guard handed back his paperwork. Proceed to delivery point, Charlie. Do not deviate from the marked route. Any unauthorized stops or detours will result in immediate detention. Understood, Jason said, climbing back into the truck. As the second gate opened, Jason felt a shift in the air. He was entering Area 51 proper now, a place few civilians had ever seen from the inside. I'm in, he whispered to Maya as he drove through. Second checkpoint cleared. Viewer count is climbing, Maya reported. People are sharing the private link. Nearly 200 watching now. The road ahead dipped down into a valley. From this vantage point, Jason could see the sprawling complex for the first time without obstruction. It was larger than he'd imagined, a collection of hangars, administration buildings, and structures with no obvious purpose, all protected by layers of security, fences, and what he assumed were motion sensors. This is it, Maya, he said quietly. No turning back now. The delivery route led him to a loading dock attached to what appeared to be a commissary building. As he'd done many times before, Jason backed the truck up to the platform and put it in park. Routine delivery, he announced to the 2 workers waiting for him. I've got 26 crates for you today. One of the workers, a heavy-set man named Garza, who Jason recognized from previous deliveries, nodded. We'll take it from here. This was the moment of truth. The point where Jason was supposed to stay with the truck while the workers unloaded it. Instead, he casually reached for a clipboard. Actually, he said, I need to verify the cold storage items personally. New company policy after the spoilage incident last month. Garza looked annoyed but shrugged. Fine, follow me. This was exactly what Jason had hoped for, an invitation inside. He followed Gaza through a set of double doors into the facility, mentally mapping every turn they took. "Feed still good," he whispered, when Gaza was a few steps ahead. "Perfect," Maya confirmed in his ear. "But be careful. This is already further than we planned for the first phase." They entered a large kitchen area, then through another door to a walk-in refrigerator. Jason made a show of checking temperatures and inspecting packages, while his glasses recorded everything. "I need to use the restroom," Jason said after completing his inspection. "Is there one I can use?" Gaza pointed down a hallway. "Through there, first door on the left." Jason nodded thanks and walked in that direction, heart hammering in his chest. The moment Gaza was out of sight, he took the first right instead of the left, heading deeper into the facility. "Jason," Maya's voice had an edge of panic. "What are you doing? This isn't the plan." "Change of plans," he whispered back. "I might not get another chance this good." He moved quickly but naturally, as if he belonged there. The corridors were surprisingly mundane. White walls, linoleum floors, occasional bulletin boards with safety notices and shift schedules. 600 viewers now, Maya reported. Word is spreading fast. Jason approached a junction where the institutional appearance of the hallway changed. The new corridor had darker walls and no windows. A keypad security system guarded the entrance. "Dead end," Jason murmured, preparing to turn back. Just then, the door opened. A woman in a lab coat emerged, engrossed in reading something on a tablet. Jason made a split-second decision. "Excuse me," he called out, adopting a confused tone. "I think I'm lost. Looking for the loading dock?" The woman looked up, startled. "How did you get in this section?" "Through there," Jason pointed vaguely behind him. "I'm with the food delivery. First time on this route." She looked suspicious, but seemed to accept his explanation. "This is a restricted area. Go back the way you came, take the second left and follow the signs." "Thanks," Jason said, already planning his next move. As the woman walked away, he noticed she hadn't fully closed the door behind her. The security lock hadn't engaged. "Jason, don't," Maya warned, reading his thoughts. But it was too late. Jason slipped through the door before it closed completely, entering the restricted area. "I'm in," he whispered, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "And Maya, you won't believe what I'm seeing." "Define what you're seeing," Maya demanded, her voice tense in Jason's ear, "and start moving back toward the exit. Now." Jason stood frozen in the corridor, his mind struggling to process what lay before him. Unlike the ordinary hallways of the main facility, this section felt alien, in both design and purpose. "The walls," he whispered, turning slowly so his glasses could capture everything. "They're lined with some kind of metal, not steel, something else. It has a dull glow." The corridor curved gently, illuminated by recessed lighting that pulsed subtly, almost like a heartbeat. There were no doors visible, no obvious junctions or branches, just the single path leading forward. "Viewer count just past 1,000, Maya reported. "The stream is spreading like wildfire." "But Jason, seriously, you need to retreat. This wasn't part of the plan." "I can't," Jason replied, his voice filled with wonder as he began walking forward. "Not when I'm this close." The floor beneath his feet hummed with barely perceptible vibrations. As he advanced, the temperature dropped noticeably, his breath beginning to form small clouds in front of him. "There are markings on the walls," he continued, his glasses focusing on strange symbols etched into the metal. "Not English, not anything I recognize." "Jason, security will notice you're missing any minute now," Maya warned. "Wait." Jason stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" Through the earpiece, Maya could hear it too, a low melodic hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It rose and fell in patterns that felt almost intentional, like communication. "What is that?" she whispered. I don't know, Jason replied, continuing forward. The corridor widened gradually, opening into a circular chamber. But I think I'm about to find out. He stepped into the chamber and gasped audibly. The room was dominated by a suspended structure at its centre, an object that defied easy description. It appeared partly organic, partly technological, hovering 3 feet above the floor without any visible means of support. Are you seeing this, Maya? Jason's voice trembled. Tell me you're recording this. I'm recording, she confirmed, her skepticism momentarily forgotten. But Jason, what is that thing? The object pulsed with internal light, blues and purples that shifted and swirled beneath what looked like a translucent membrane. It was roughly ovoid, perhaps 10 feet in diameter, with appendages or protrusions that extended and retracted slowly, as if exploring the air around it. It's responding to my presence, Jason whispered, taking a step closer. The light patterns changed when I entered. Around the chamber's perimeter, computer workstations and scientific equipment formed a ring. Jason approached one cautiously, his glasses capturing the displays. The screen showed diagrams, measurements, and scrolling data, all monitoring the floating entity. This is it, Maya, Jason said, his voice filled with vindication. This is what my father was talking about. Non-terrestrial intelligence. It's not just a ship or technology they're hiding here. It's a living being. Or something that appears to be living, Maya cautioned. Be careful, Jason. Jason circled the chamber, documenting everything. The walls were covered with the same strange symbols he'd seen in the corridor, but here they were arranged in patterns, almost like astronomical charts. These look like star maps, he murmured, focusing his glasses on them, but not of our solar system. The humming sound grew louder as he moved closer to the suspended entity. The temperature dropped further, frost beginning to form on nearby surfaces. 2,000 viewers now, Maya reported, and I'm seeing messages coming in. People are asking if this is real or some elaborate hoax. It's real, Jason assured her, reaching out toward the entity. I can feel the cold radiating from it. There's a kind of static electricity in the air. Just as his hand came within inches of the membrane, a voice spoke, not from the entity, but from behind him. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Jason spun around to find a man in a white lab coat standing at the chamber entrance. Unlike the scientist Jason had imagined working at such a facility, this man appeared ordinary, middle-aged, slightly balding, with round glasses and a calm demeanour. You don't have clearance to be here, the man said, making no move to sound an alarm or call security. What is this thing? Jason demanded, gesturing toward the floating entity. That's classified, the scientist replied, then tilted his head slightly. You already knew that, didn't you, Mr. Reeve? Jason felt his blood run cold. You know who I am. We know about your channel, your theories. The scientist stepped further into the room. We've been watching your progress for some time. We? Jason asked, backing away slightly. The project team, the man clarified. Though I suspect you're more interested in what that is than who we are. The entity pulsed brighter, its appendages moving more rapidly, as if agitated by their conversation. Is it alive? Jason asked, his journalist instincts taking over despite his fear. In a manner of speaking, the scientist answered. Though not in any way we traditionally define life, it exists simultaneously in multiple states and possibly multiple dimensions. And you're studying it. We're communicating with it, the scientist corrected. Or trying to. It's been challenging. Jason's mind raced. This was beyond anything he'd imagined finding, not just proof of alien life, but active research, communication. How long has it been here? Since 47, the scientist said matter-of-factly. Though not in this form, it's been evolving. A sudden alarm blared through the facility, red lights flashing in the corridor outside. That would be security noticing your absence, the scientist said, sighing. I had hoped for more time. Time for what? Jason asked, backing toward another exit on the far side of the chamber. To explain, the scientist said. There are things you should know before you share this with the world. He gestured toward Jason's glasses. Yes, I know you're streaming. That's why I approached you instead of simply having security arrest you. Why tell me anything? Jason asked, confusion mixing with suspicion. Because it wants me to, the scientist replied, pointing to the entity. It's been waiting for someone like you. Before Jason could respond, the entity pulsed brilliantly, the light almost blinding. In his ear, Maya cried out, Jason, the feed is glitching! The suspended object began to rotate rapidly, its membrane becoming transparent, revealing intricate structures within, organic technology beyond human understanding. What's happening? Jason demanded. Contact, the scientist said, his voice filled with wonder. It's never done this before. The entity emitted a piercing tone that made Jason clutch at his ears. Then, impossibly, he heard a voice in his head, not in English or any human language, but somehow perfectly comprehensible. You have found us, at last. Maya, are you getting this? Jason gasped, his voice barely audible over the high-pitched tone resonating through the chamber. The audio's distorted, Maya replied, panic evident in her voice. Viewer count is exploding, over 20,000 now, but the feed keeps glitching. The entity pulsed with increasing intensity, its light casting strange shadows across the room. The scientist stood transfixed, making no move to interfere. We have waited, the voice continued in Jason's mind, through cycles of your star, waiting for one who would see. See what more? Jason asked aloud, unsure if he needed to speak for the entity to understand him. The truth between worlds. The scientist had moved to a console and was frantically typing, his eyes wide with excitement. It's never communicated this clearly before, he said, half to himself. Not in 75 years of study. Security alarms continued to blare outside, but strangely no guards had appeared yet. Jason glanced nervously at the doors, then back at the entity. What are you? He asked. The entity's appendages extended, creating a complex geometric pattern in the air. The temperature in the room plummeted further, frost forming on Jason's eyebrows and lashes. We are observers, collectors of knowledge, travellers between possibilities. Aliens, Jason breathed. No, the voice corrected. Not foreign, not extraterrestrial. We have always been here, in the spaces between what you perceive as reality. The scientist laughed softly. That's what we've been trying to tell the higher-ups for decades. They're not from another planet, they're from another dimension that intersects with ours. The entity pulsed in what Jason somehow knew was agreement. Your kind sees 3 dimensions, sometimes glimpses a 4th. We exist in many more. And you've been here since 1947? Jason asked. A part of us manifested then, the voice explained, when your weapon tore holes in the fabric between states of being. Nuclear testing, the scientist clarified. The Trinity test and subsequent detonations created quantum disturbances we still don't fully understand. Jason's mind reeled with the implications. So Roswell, not a spacecraft crash, the scientist said, but a dimensional incursion point. This entity, or a part of it, phased into our reality. Maya, Jason whispered, are you hearing this? Partially, she replied. The signal's weakening. But Jason, something else is happening. There's chatter on emergency channels, military movements. Jason looked at the scientist. Why now? Why communicate with me after all this time? The man shook his head. I don't know. It's never shown interest in our communications before. It observes. It allows us to run tests. But direct interaction? Never. Because you are the messenger, the voice told Jason. The one who will share truth. Through my channel, Jason realized. My followers. Awareness must spread. The barriers thin. The entity's light suddenly intensified, forming distinct patterns that Jason somehow recognized as mathematical equations, complex formulas describing multidimensional space. It's showing me something, Jason whispered, struggling to comprehend the information flooding his mind. Coordinates? No. Prediction models. The scientist moved closer, his face illuminated by the pulsing light. What does it mean? He asked, and Jason wasn't sure if the question was directed at him or the entity. Your weapons tear reality again, the voice explained. Not with physical force, but with observation. The watchers change what is watched. Quantum observation principles, the scientist murmured. But on a macro scale, the sky darkens, the entity continued. They come through the tears. Who? Jason demanded. Who comes through? Instead of answering directly, the entity projected images into Jason's mind. Shadows moving between stars, vast intelligences that dwarfed human understanding. Entities that existed in spectrums beyond light and darkness. Others, Jason gasped. Other beings from beyond our dimension. The others do not observe. They consume. The scientist had gone pale. It's trying to warn us, he whispered. Warning about what? Jason asked, his voice trembling. Before the entity could respond, a new alarm sounded. Deeper, more urgent than the security alerts. Red emergency lights began flashing in patterns Jason hadn't seen before. The scientist looked up, his face contorted with panic. They're initiating containment protocols, he said. Full facility lockdown. Because of me? Jason asked. No. The scientist's voice was grim. Because of that. He pointed to the entity, which had begun to change. Its membrane was rippling, the light within flickering between its usual blue-purple hues and a deep, unsettling crimson. Too late. The voice in Jason's mind had changed, becoming distorted, fragmented. Tear already opening. They sense me. They come. Jason! Maya's voice crackled through the earpiece. Something's interfering with all signals in the area. The stream is breaking up. The entity convulsed, its appendages whipping violently through the air. One of them passed through a nearby console, which sparked and went dark. It's phase shifting, the scientist explained, backing away, losing cohesion in our dimension. The chamber doors suddenly slid open, and armed personnel rushed in. Not regular military, but figures in specialized containment suits with unfamiliar insignia. On the ground, now! One of them shouted. Jason raised his hands, but remained standing. People need to know what's happening here, he said, gesturing toward his glasses. Thousands are watching. Not anymore, the leader replied. All signals from this facility have been blocked. Jason glanced at the scientist, who nodded grimly, confirming the claim. It doesn't matter, Jason insisted. The stream was distributed through multiple relays. You can't erase what people have already seen. The entity emitted a high-pitched whine that made the armed personnel wince. The lights in the chamber flickered, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to waver, like heat shimmer on the desert pavement. Tell them, the voice commanded in Jason's mind, weaker now. The sky has changed. The stars move. They come. Sir, one of the armed figures addressed the scientist. Project Overthrow has been authorized. We need to move you to a safe location. The scientist's face drained of color. That protocol hasn't been activated since 1979. What's Project Overthrow? Jason demanded. Dimensional reset, the scientist replied quietly. They are going to try to sever the connection. And what happens to the entity? The scientist looked at the floating form, which was becoming increasingly unstable. It gets pushed back to its own dimensional plane, along with anything else that doesn't belong in ours. The implication was clear and terrifying. Maya, Jason whispered, though he wasn't sure if she could still hear him. If you're getting this, download everything. Back it up. Share it everywhere. The armed personnel surrounded Jason, weapons trained on him. Jason Reeve, the leader said formally, you are hereby detained under National Security Directive 133. Surrender all recording devices immediately. As they moved to apprehend him, the entity let out a final piercing cry, both audible and psychic, that dropped everyone in the room to their knees. Remember, the voice echoed in Jason's mind as his vision began to blur. The sky used to be bluer. The last thing Jason saw before losing consciousness was the entity collapsing in on itself, forming a swirling vortex of light and shadow that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around it. And then, darkness. 3 days later, Maya Torres sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by computer equipment and empty coffee cups. Dark circles underscored her eyes, testament to sleepless nights spent searching, analysing, uploading. The live stream had cut out exactly 73 minutes after Jason entered the restricted area. The final images, the entity collapsing, the armed personnel moving in, Jason falling, had been seen by over 50,000 viewers before the feed died. Then came the denials. Official statements described the footage as an elaborate hoax. Social media platforms flagged and restricted the clips. Major news networks refused to cover the story. Within hours, the original stream had been scrubbed from most platforms, though copies continued to appear and disappear across the internet in a digital game of whack-a-mole. Maya had spent the first 24 hours trying to contact Jason, calling his phone, messaging his accounts, even reaching out to Desert Valley Logistics. All she received were automated responses or redirections. It was as if Jason Reeve had never existed. She stared at her main monitor, where frame-by-frame analysis of the final moments played on loop. The entity's collapse, the strange distortion of space around it, details that no special effects team could have fabricated on the fly. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another takedown notice for a mirror of the stream she'd uploaded to an obscure video platform. They can't erase it all, she murmured to herself, a mantra she'd repeated countless times since Jason disappeared. Too many people saw. A knock at her door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone, and few people knew where she lived. Cautiously, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. A delivery person stood outside holding a small package. "Delivery for Torres," the person called through the door. Maya hesitated, then opened the door halfway, security chain still engaged. "I didn't order anything." The delivery person shrugged. "Just doing my job, ma'am." They held out a small padded envelope and a digital signature pad. "Sign here." Maya signed and took the package, closing and locking the door immediately after. The envelope had no return address, just her name printed in block letters. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was the single USB drive, black, unmarked, ordinary. She stared at it for a long moment, then carried it to her isolation computer, a machine not connected to the internet, used specifically for examining suspicious files. She inserted the drive and waited as the system scanned it for malware. Finding none, she opened the sole file on the drive, an audio recording labelled simply "Final." Jason's voice filled the room, distorted and distant, as if speaking through layers of interference. "Maya, if you're hearing this, the dead man's switch worked. I don't know what happened after they took me. I don't know if I'm still here. but I need you to understand what I learned." Maya's eyes filled with tears as she listened to Jason describe what the entity had shown him in those final moments. Glimpses of other dimensions, warnings about tears in reality, beings that existed beyond human comprehension. "The entity wasn't just communicating with me," Jason's voice continued. "It was using me, using us, to spread awareness. It needed people to know, because something is coming, Maya. Something that's been trying to break through for decades." The recording crackled with static. "They'll try to discredit the footage. They'll say it was all fake, but thousands saw it live. The truth is out there now, fragmented but spreading, and that's what the entity wanted. Not just one person knowing everything, but millions knowing pieces. Collective awareness." Maya wiped her eyes, listening intently as Jason's voice grew fainter. "I don't think I'm coming back from this, Maya, but I need you to keep fighting. Keep sharing what we found, and watch the skies. It showed me that the colour is changing. Subtle shifts most people won't notice. The sky used to be bluer." The recording ended with a burst of static, then silence. Maya sat motionless for several minutes, processing what she'd heard. Then, with newfound determination, she moved to her main computer and began typing, creating new accounts, finding new platforms, preparing to spread Jason's final message. As she worked, her phone buzzed with messages from followers, friends, fellow researchers, all asking the same questions. Was it real? Where was Jason? What had they discovered? The answers weren't simple, but the mission was clear. The truth needed to spread, piece by piece, person by person. Outside her window, Maya paused to look at the evening sky. Had the blue always been this shade? Was it changing as Jason claimed? She couldn't be certain, but she was sure of one thing. Jason Reeves' last stream had started something that couldn't be contained. The questions he'd raised couldn't be unasked. The glimpse he had provided of entities beyond human understanding, of dimensional barriers thinning, had planted seeds of awareness in thousands of minds. Her computer pinged with notifications as new copies of the stream appeared online, shared by strangers who refused to let Our story is called False Skies, a conspiracy thriller about a government's darkest deception and the whistleblower who exposed it. It imagines a world where the worst terror attack in modern history was not only foreseen, but deliberately orchestrated to spark endless war and funnel billions into a sprawling military-industrial complex. Now, 2 decades later, an unassuming former FBI data analyst named Thomas Keane leaks hidden documents that point to a monstrous betrayal and becomes the most wanted man in the nation. Pursued by a shadowy agency determined to keep the official version sealed, Keane races to share the truth with a public reeling from revelations that might reshape the entire post-attack world order. If you find your eyes growing heavy at any point, that's okay. This story is meant to be richly detailed. Perhaps you'll drift to sleep while pondering how fear can become a profitable enterprise, or maybe you'll stay riveted till the final word, uncovering each layer with breathless suspense. Either way, I hope you come away with new insights into how power, once obtained, can cling fiercely to the shadows. Shall we begin? Then settle in, let your breathing slow, and imagine the flicker of old computer screens, top-secret binders, and a few missing pages that change the course of entire nations. This is False Skies, told in 5 parts, each revealing a deeper rung of the labyrinth. Listen closely. The greatest secrets often hide in the quiet corners of official stories. Thomas Keane didn't feel like a revolutionary when he first pressed send. He was simply a man weighed down by guilt, holding a flash drive stuffed with revelations that haunted him for years. The file name he'd chosen of Black Dust gave no hint to the explosive contents. A trove of classified FBI memos, shipping manifests and encrypted communications that, if authenticated, would confirm every darkest rumour about the worst terrorist attack in modern memory. The day of the leak dawned cloudy, ironically anticlimactic for a moment that might reshape history. Keane sat in a dingy motel room near a dusty highway, a battered laptop perched on a wobbly table. The place smelled of stale coffee and regret, but it had functioning Wi-Fi. He checked his secure connection one last time, heart thrumming. With trembling fingers, he uploaded black dust to an overseas whistleblower website known for releasing hidden archives. He paused, typed a short note, for the thousands who died and the millions misled. Then he pressed send. Within the hour, that file reached multiple journalists and a global news outlet with a reputation for defying government censors. The outlet's editorial board pored over it, verifying bits of data in a hush of excitement and alarm. By the end of the day, the first breaking story appeared online, overshadowed by disclaimers. Unverified documents claim to reveal inside plot behind 20-year-old attack. Skeptics rolled their eyes. Conspiracy theorists hailed it as the smoking gun they'd always wanted. Most mainstream media initially dismissed it, an editing glitch, a potential hoax, or AI-generated forgery, the official line insisted. Yet some found the content too consistent to be random fakes. A set of typed memos from high-level intelligence briefings dated months before the attack, discussing the necessity of a catalytic event to unify public support for indefinite overseas campaigns. Detailed logs showed insurance policy expansions on certain tower floors days prior. Even stand-down orders for certain war games suspiciously matched the real timeline. Keane watched from his motel room's flickering TV as a breathless anchor tried to explain the leak, disclaiming that the White House calls it foreign propaganda. He sighed. The official denial had begun. Next would come the manhunt for the leaker. He closed his laptop, stuffed it in a bag and left the motel. Time to vanish. He'd served in the FBI's data analytics wing for nearly a decade, compiling anomaly reports around that fateful day. Step by step, he realized too many coincidences tied private defense contractors, intelligence heads, and financial bigwigs, all who profited from the subsequent wars. He quietly copied reams of old files, awaiting the day he had the courage to blow the whistle. That day had come. Elsewhere, powerful forces mobilized. The intelligence community's upper echelons recognized the name Thomas Keane from previous security audits. They suspected him. Within hours, calls went out from a hush-hush division to find him, brand him as a threat to national security. The director of an ultra-secret agency, Eldridge Shaw, personally oversaw the containment plan. He believed the official story must remain unchallenged, or the entire post-attack order might unravel. By midnight, bulletins labelled Keane suspected hacker and domestic threat. Agents started combing digital footprints, scouring camera feeds from near the FBI building. Shaw himself made a call to a contact at the large media conglomerates, instructing them to bury coverage of the story until further notice. The compliance was near instant. Mainstream news gave minimal airtime to the leak, overshadowing it with other headlines. But the genie was out of the bottle. On social media, the hashtag #BlackDust soared, with amateurs dissecting every memo line. A few data experts cross-referenced the IP addresses in the communications, linking them to known government subdomains. Even the partial revelation stunned the public. If the documents were genuine, it implied that some element within the US establishment not only predicted but abetted the terror event, ensuring maximum casualties for maximum political effect. The phrase false skies emerged, referencing how the public's reality had been manufactured like a painted ceiling above them, concealing the real orchestrators. Within a day, small protests flared outside federal buildings in major cities. People demanded clarity. The government's official statement repeated the forgery or foreign propaganda claim. That evening, hackers with anarchy streaks threatened to leak more verifying files if the mainstream media didn't pick it up. Tensions soared. Meanwhile, the stock market wobbled as rumours of insider deals from decades prior re-emerged. Some corporations connected to military contracting faced plunging shares. Keane watched from a safe house now, a friend's abandoned cabin in the woods. He had only the radio for news, and the swirl of distrust and fury filtered through the static. He dreaded how quickly the establishment might label him a traitor. Indeed, the next morning the FBI publicly named him as a prime suspect in a mass leak of classified data, painting him as an extremist. His old colleagues, uncertain, gave no comment. But behind the scenes, many believed the documents might be real. After all, they recognised Keane's skill in combing data for anomalies. Among the swirl stood a figure named Sarah Voss, an investigative journalist blacklisted from major networks for challenging official 9/11 narratives in the past. She recognised the pattern in these newly leaked documents. They matched puzzle pieces she'd glimpsed in hushed conversation with insiders. She reached out to the new site that hosted the files, leaving an encrypted message. "I can help verify. Let me speak to the source." That message eventually found its way to Keane via an online confidant, setting the stage for an alliance that might shake the entire narrative. Thus, from a dusty hideout, Keane typed a coded reply. The story's real race began. Could he deliver evidence to a credible journalist and blow the entire false narrative wide open before the apparatus of Homeland Security, the very system built on the official Sporseum, crushed him? The next step would be forging that alliance with Voss and hoping her instincts for truth outweighed her fear of retribution. For if the government's darkest deception was about to be exposed, those who profited from war would not hesitate to silence him, or anyone else, to keep the official illusions intact. 2 days after the leak, the national conversation roiled in confusion. Official channels insisted the Black Dust documents were an elaborate hoax. Yet smaller media sites posted side-by-side comparisons with legitimate CIA or FBI formatting, showing consistent digital footprints. The public found itself caught between an official narrative and a swirling impetus to question everything. Some believed wholeheartedly in the new revelations, others recoiled or felt threatened by the idea that the last 2 decades of conflict might have been orchestrated. Thomas Keane was already on every national watch list. He'd been a mid-level FBI data analyst until 2 years prior, known for thoroughness but also for quietly raising flags about inconsistent intelligence reports pre-9/11. The day he left the bureau, no one suspected he'd spent months copying old files slated for permanent seal. Now his old supervisors told the press that he was mentally unstable, harbouring extremist theories. They withheld mention that those same theories had nearly led to internal inquiries years ago, until higher-ups quashed them. In a suburban neighbourhood outside the capital, a black SUV pulled up to a modest house. 4 men in plain suits stepped out. They were from a specialised domestic counter-intel unit, effectively an arm of the Black Archive, a covert group rumoured to be tied to intelligence and corporate interests. They forced the occupant, a middle-aged data engineer who once worked with Keane, to open his home computer. They rifled through his messages, seizing any mention of Thomas or Black Dust or files. This was repeated across multiple homes of ex-FBI colleagues, all without official warrants. The watchers answered to a higher chain, operating in the shadows. Director Eldridge Shaw, head of a new consolidated intelligence agency formed after 9/11, presided over these manhunts from a sleek government tower. He remembered the day of the attacks vividly, the chaos that allowed the Patriot Act and massive expansions of surveillance. He'd advanced quickly by endorsing these expansions and forging alliances with top defence contractors. Now, seeing the leaked docs threaten that entire architecture, Shaw was determined to snuff out the source. Reeve, or Keane, whatever his name is, must be found, he told subordinates. We cannot let fantasies unravel 2 decades of progress. As the manhunt escalated, Keane lurked in the outskirts. He recognised the checkposts on highways, the routine scanning of licence plates. He switched vehicles, used an old identity pass, and avoided all major city centres. He survived on snack bars and occasional small store purchases with cash only. At night, he found a cheap motel, paying in a borrowed name. Every moment felt like it might bring a black SUV squealing into the lot. The tension weighed on him, gnawing at his nerves. Sarah Voss, the investigative reporter, finally established contact with him through a secure chat app. "We need to meet," she wrote. "I can help verify these files properly. People trust me to an extent in the alternative media sphere. We must do it soon. The window is closing." Keane hesitated, knowing any in-person meeting risked being traced. But if they never took that risk, the documents might remain in a swirl of unverified rumour, easy for the mainstream to dismiss. They arranged a rendezvous in a small coastal town's library after hours. The next day, as Keane approached the library, he spotted an unmarked sedan idling in the parking lot. Fear pricked him. Watchers might be tailing. To confirm, he looped around the block. The sedan didn't move, possibly just a random visitor. Summoning courage, he stepped inside. Voss, a tall woman with a worn leather jacket, recognised him from the scattered photos circulated in the media. They sat in a corner among dusty shelves. She offered a handshake, voice calm but urgent. "Thomas, I believe you. The official story has always had holes. Let's finalise the proof so we can break it wide open." Keane exhaled relief, sliding a small USB drive across the table. This is a more complete set than what was posted. Contains direct memos about the stand-down orders, the deals with defence contractors, the flight path manipulations. Also internal emails referencing the hijackers as assets gone rogue. He paused, tears flickering in his eyes. They used the tragedy for indefinite war, Sarah. They let it happen, or worse, engineered it. Sarah's breath caught. She skimmed a few files on her laptop, eyes widening at references to bank accounts, coded references to Operation Silence. She nodded. This is explosive, but we need a big platform, enough to force coverage. If we just post it on my blog, they'll discredit or block it. We'll get shut down. She explained a plan. Find a mainstream journalist with a rebellious streak, or do a well-publicised live event that too many watchers can't black out entirely. Suddenly, a muffled scuffle at the library entrance startled them. A figure in dark clothes peered in, Keane tensed. Sarah pressed the laptop closed. They ducked behind shelves as footsteps approached, but the library's old caretaker bumbled out, greeting them obliviously. The suspicious figure, glimpsed through the glass, retreated. Possibly a false alarm, possibly a watcher verifying the location. They parted ways quickly, agreeing to meet again in 48 hours near a major city, planning an infiltration of a local news station that might still allow an unfiltered broadcast. Danger soared. If watchers caught wind of their plan, they'd likely come down with lethal force. That evening, Keane received a frantic text from a friend who had once helped him interpret old FA logs. "One of our guys is dead. A boat accident. They're picking us off." The message cut short. Keane shuddered. The watchers had begun eliminating secondary sources who could confirm the leak's authenticity. He realised the ephemeral window for truth was closing. On the streets, protests flared up as rumours swirled of official foreknowledge. Some saw it as disrespectful to the memory of the victims. Others believed the truth must come out no matter how painful. The government, for its part, ramped up a rhetorical war on misinformation. Director Shaw delivered a short, ominous address, vowing that domestic agitators spreading baseless conspiracies will be brought to justice. Among the swirling chaos, Sarah discovered partial references in the documents to a deeper archive. The Saturn Files, an intelligence ledger tracking post-attack financial flows from official budgets to clandestine owners. If they found that ledger's location, they could show the money trail behind the war expansions. That might be the final nail in the coffin of the official story. They needed it, but time was short. Thus the manhunt overshadowed all. Helicopters roamed certain highways, random car searches increased, and the populace grew uneasy, sensing the government's fear that the leak might be real. Keane ducked from motel to motel, adopting new disguises. Soon, though, his luck would run out. or he'd have to risk a direct showdown, trusting the thunder of public outrage to keep him alive. Little did he realise, the Watchers were about to tighten the net, deploying a Black Ops team to ensure the leak never reached unstoppable momentum. If Keane couldn't outmaneuver them long enough to break the final evidence, the official illusions would remain intact. If he did, though, the entire structure of post-attack governance might collapse. The next moves would determine everything. The following week saw Thomas Keane evading Watchers by day and collaborating with Sarah Voss by night, each meeting more urgent than the last. They discovered references to the Saturn files scattered in older CIA memos. Allegedly, it was an encrypted database that meticulously traced the money funneling to defence contractors, oil conglomerates and political campaigns in the immediate weeks after the catastrophic event. If authentic, it would confirm the real motive behind the orchestrated false flag: indefinite war and profiteering. At a safe house borrowed from an old contact of Sarah's, they pored over these hints by lamplight. Among the digital shards was a location clue: a retired NSA facility on the outskirts of a southwestern desert, defunct but rumoured to store old backups. "We find that offline archive," Sarah said. "We can copy the Saturn files in raw form. That's the smoking gun." Keane nodded, though dread of infiltration weighed on him. Between them, they had minimal resources: a battered car, a few $1,000s in cash, and a handful of laptops. The Watchers, on the other hand, had near limitless means: drones, infiltration teams, access to every camera feed in the nation. But the Watchers didn't fully expect them to attempt a break-in at a presumably abandoned facility, so maybe the element of surprise worked in their favour. Director Eldridge Shaw ramped up the clampdown. The official narrative shaped the public mind. A rogue ex-FBI analyst has unleashed foreign-forged documents aimed at undermining national security. Many believed it, but a growing minority saw government overreach, especially after multiple suspicious accidents claimed the lives of other potential whistleblowers. People asked, if it's so false, why chase and kill so aggressively? In one instance, a known data archivist was found shot in his home, with the press labelling it a botched robbery, ignoring the data archivist's link to the leaked material. On social media, had black dust soared. Some city squares erupted in protest, carrying signs that read "We deserve the truth" or "Stop killing our whistleblowers." The Watchers responded by intensifying arrests, calling them rioters. Keane tried to remain focused. He realised that if the Saturn files were real, it might show direct bank transfers from major corporate boards into the pockets of certain officials, all tied to legislation passing huge war budgets after the false flag. That would upend the entire post-attack establishment. "No wonder they're stopping at nothing," Sarah murmured. Securing fake IDs, they travelled cross-country by back roads. Each motel they used for a single night, paying cash. They dodged major highways, suspecting licence plate readers. The Watchers likely guessed their aim was to expose more data, but might not know the exact target. Meanwhile, the tension between them soared. The climate was near police state. Newscasts repeated that the domestic terrorist Thomas Keane must be turned in. Civilians were promised big rewards for tips. Billboards with Keane's face popped up along highways. He wore a baseball cap and used tinted glasses, but each day was a dice roll. A near encounter. On a lonely stretch, a black SUV sped behind them. They recognised the pattern. Sarah swerved onto a side route, forging through a small farmland path. The Watchers gave chase. Shots rang out, blowing a tyre. The car careened into a ditch. They scrambled out, hid among tall corn. The Watchers searched, but eventually gave up, presumably to avoid a big scene. This brush with violent capture left them rattled, but also more resolved. "We're obviously on the right track if they're that desperate," Sarah said, breath shaky. Finally, after days, they reached the deserted perimeter of the old NSA outpost. It was ringed by a crumbling fence, a few rusted signposts. By the look of the cracked asphalt and weed-choked yard, it had been abandoned for over a decade. Perfect place to bury secrets. Under twilight, they found a corner of the fence cut open by looters. They slipped inside quietly. The main building rose in silhouette, windows boarded up. A stray coyote howled in the distance, wind carrying a faint metallic whistling from open vents. Inside, dust-coated floors. Old cubicles sat in disarray. They used flashlights to navigate. Eventually they located a sub-basement with battered computer racks. A few beeped faintly with emergency power. "There's power? That's suspicious," Keane muttered. Indeed, it suggested the Watchers might still be pulling some data from here. They approached a locked door labelled Server Vault Archive 6. With Sarah's phone, they scanned a partial code from the documents, generating a bypass sequence that might override older system locks. After multiple tries, a green light flickered. The vault door clunked open. Inside the vault, rows of drives and reels lined metal shelves. Dusty but humming with minimal climate control. They sifted through labels: Operation Cast Peak, Post-K-War Roster, Saturn. That was it. A battered cluster of servers with the word Saturn FSV. They carefully powered one terminal, hooking it to a laptop. Sarah typed a root command. The screen glowed. Restricted. Saturn 1, 2, 3. Enter pass. They tried typical keywords from the docs. On the third attempt, a beep. Access. They were in, files scrolled, each referencing massive funding authorizations, building demolitions, insider trading, logs dated within days of the big attack. The scope was monstrous. It implicated high-level bureaucrats, big banks, and even a few journalists. They orchestrated the tragedy to galvanize fear, pass endless war budgets, feed the arms economy, Sarah whispered, stunned. All hidden under national security drapery. Some lines suggested hijackers were known assets used as a controlled ignition. The betrayal was staggering. In that hush, footsteps upstairs. The Watchers had arrived, no doubt detecting the power usage. "We must copy this now," Keane said, launching a data transfer to multiple external drives. Meanwhile, Sarah prepared to kill lights and hide, but the Watchers rushed down, flashlights slicing through gloom. Gunfire echoed. Bullets pinged off server racks. Sarah huddled behind a console, returning fire with a small pistol she carried. Keane initiated an upload, hooking the server to a secure satellite link via a portable router. The Watchers advanced. He typed frantically, the progress bar inching along, transmission at 10%. Then Director Shaw himself stepped in. "Stop!" he roared, voice reverberating in the metal corridor. "Keane, you have no idea what you're unleashing. The stability of entire alliances depends on burying that day's complexities." Shots resumed. Sarah took a graze to her shoulder, but kept the Watchers pinned. The bar reached 50%. Shaw barked an order to lob a small explosive. They tossed a flashbang. The ear-shattering pop disoriented them. The Watchers closed in, tackling Sarah. Another pinned Keane. The laptop screen cracked under a boot. The upload froze at 80%. In the struggle, Keane twisted free, smashing a guard's face with the laptop, which ironically forced the laptop back to life. The Watchers tried to pull cables. Meanwhile, a stray bullet hit a server coolant line. Steam hissed. The infiltration team realized this was too risky. The entire place might go up. Shaw advanced on Keane, gun raised. "You can die here with your illusions, or you can vanish quietly. The truth will never see daylight." Suddenly an explosion from the coolant line triggered a chain reaction in the old power system. Fire licked the corners, sending Watchers scrambling. Sarah crawled to safety. Keane, battered, saw the upload bar at 98%. He roared in defiance, pressing a final keystroke to confirm. The system beeped success. The Watchers realized the data had been sent out, unstoppable now. Furious, one aimed at Keane's chest. A final shot rang out. Darkness overcame him. The Watchers yanked the cable, but it was too late. The Saturn files had presumably reached a safe node on the open web. Alarms beeped. The facility's meltdown forced a hurried retreat. In the swirling smoke, Sarah was dragged away by an explosion's concussive wave. The Watchers grabbed Shaw, retreating. The entire sub-basement collapsed in flame and dust. For all they knew, Keane perished under the rubble. But the Watchers had lost the bigger war. The Saturn files were free. Within hours, a torrent of new evidence, the Saturn files, flooded the internet. Anonymous activists, archivists, and journalists worldwide mirrored the data. Even as official agencies tried to block or discredit it, the story soared across social media, overshadowing government censorship efforts. Original documents codenamed Operation White Dawn, some Project Switchboard, commissioned for Filter some Rossi, provided stark details. Insider collusion with extremist groups, advanced planning to ensure that attacks triggered panic and indefinite war mobilization, international reaction. Allies demanded urgent clarifications from Washington. Rival nations called for an emergency UN session. The general public, seeing internal memos where top officials weighed acceptable civilian losses for strategic advantage, reeled in fury. Large-scale protests ignited in multiple capitals. People demanded resignations. The entire intelligence apparatus faced the biggest crisis of legitimacy since the day it was formed. Meanwhile, the White House insisted the documents were tampered forgeries, but the mass of cross-corroboration was overwhelming. Anonymous data scientists validated digital signatures, timestamps, usage logs consistent with 20-year-old records. Even some mid-level intelligence employees, shaken by the revelations, publicly confirmed the authenticity. Back home, in the US, the meltdown was immediate. Rallies erupted outside major government buildings, calling for arrests of those named in the files. Corporate board members from arms manufacturing companies faced lawsuits. The stock market dived, particularly for defense sector stocks. Over time, entire boards resigned, some fleeing the country. Various retired generals disclaiming involvement or giving partial confessions fueled headlines. The public found itself torn between anger, betrayal, and heartbreak, reliving the trauma of that fateful day under a horrifying new lens. Media torn. Some mainstream outlets quickly pivoted, acknowledging the new data as genuine after initial attempts to bury it. High-profile anchors apologized for previously parroting the official story. Others doubled down on patriotic narratives, ironically fueling further distrust. The swirl of disinformation versus actual data soared, but the raw evidence was too extensive to suppress. You can't close the barn door after the horses fled, a commentator said. The entire architecture of post-attack policy is under question. Director Eldridge Shaw attempted a grand press conference to reassert authority, but the crowd drowned him in jeers. Calls for congressional hearings soared. In a last-chance effort, Shaw's office declared a national security emergency, urging martial law to keep order. That, ironically, only inflamed dissent. Certain states refused to cooperate. Over the next weeks, the old alignment of power began fracturing. Investigations launched from multiple angles, with newly emboldened lawmakers prosecuting those who orchestrated the post-attack expansions for personal gain. Sarah Voss emerged from the southwestern fiasco battered but alive. She revealed how Watchers had infiltrated that abandoned NSA site, how Keane died a hero finalising the upload. She published a moving column titled One Man's Last Key Press, describing how, in a swirl of gunfire, Keane completed the Saturn files transmission, ensuring no one could bury it. The piece went viral, shaping the public's view of Keane as a tragic whistleblower who gave everything for the truth. At the local level, families of 9/11 victims demanded new trials. The old official commissions were discredited. People realised entire reams of contradictory evidence had been sealed. Even the original investigators admitted they'd been misled or threatened. The emotional toll soared once more. Many felt as though they'd been lied to for decades about the biggest national tragedy. A wave of introspection overcame the country. How had fear become so profitable, and how did good people allow it? Internationally, alliances that had supported the war on terror felt betrayed. Some withdrew forces from contested regions. Others launched their own parliamentary investigations, suspecting shared complicity. The world order that was shaped after the attack started crumbling, replaced by an uncertain future. Some dared to hope it meant a less militarised approach. Others worried that new extremist groups might exploit the chaos. In the midst of all this, rumours circulated that Thomas Keane might still be alive, sightings in some far-off place, yet no concrete proof existed. Official statements considered him presumed deceased. If he survived, he might have chosen the anonymity of an unknown identity, having done what he set out to do. 6 months later, a massive Senate hearing convened. Top officials were subpoenaed. The public watched enthralled as ex-generals, ex-CEOs, and ex-administration figures from 20 years prior faced grilling. Some invoked national security, others pled the fifth, while a few confessed partial roles. Indictments followed, though not all ended in convictions. The system was too vast, too intricately rigged. Yet the symbolic effect was undeniable. Never again would the official story be accepted unchallenged. At the same time, Sarah Voss launched an independent media platform broadcasting daily updates on the False Skies Inquiry. People from across the spectrum contributed testimonies, documents, or personal stories of how they'd suspect hush-ups. Freed from blacklists, she soared as a public figure, championing the cause of government accountability. A year after the Saturn Files meltdown, a new memorial was erected near the site of the original 9/11 tragedy. A statue depicting a single figure pressing a key, a reflection of Keane's final act. The inscription read, "They took truth from us in the shadows, he brought it back in the light." Visitors left flowers, some seeking solace that the realm of power had at least partially been unmasked. Epilogue. In a quiet coastal town, a fisherman swore he recognised a man from a circulated photo. Older, hair bleached by salt and sun, eyes weighed with sadness. The man told him he used to work for the government, but no more. He spoke of illusions and the cost of unveiling them. Then he vanished at sunrise, leaving only a single battered flash drive behind. If it was Thomas Keane, he apparently chose a wandering fate, letting the world handle the legacy of his bombshell leak. Public trust in large institutions remained shaken. Some remained furious, others hopeful that a new transparency might arise. In the corners of the internet, conspiracy watchers debate if the watchers still exist, planning new false flags. But for now, the greatest deception in modern times has been laid bare. The name Black Dust stands as a testament to the unstoppable power of truth once it's unleashed. In the hush that follows, the final note, they used fear to shape the world, but one day fear lost. The truth soared free, and the illusions that once cloaked the skies were shattered in a single day.